feel good. I knew that I wouldn't. I feel good. I knew that I wouldn't.
All right, welcome to Types of Evidence. So we're going to do an overview of basically all of the scientific types of evidences that we'll look at. When I say scientific, I mean the physical evidences in contrast to the testimonial evidence, otherwise known as the circumstantial evidence, in contrast to the direct evidence. So again, circumstantial and physical evidence is what we're going to primarily focus on in the course, and the order in which we go through the different types of evidence here is basically the order that we'll study it this year, so you know exactly what to expect. So the first thing that we can use is the body as evidence, and there are a couple different directions for this. The first is death investigation, which would include the work of the coroner or the medical examiner, and the body is going to tell a story to the trained eye, a story of what happened to it. And this could be through just outward investigation by the coroner or through autopsy by the medical examiner. And beyond that, the body can also be used in terms of its stage of decomposition. So what is the post-mortem interval? How long has it been since the person died? So stages of decomposition can be used to infer that. Another thing is forensic anthropology, which would be the bones, so a very advanced body in terms of its decay stage, could tell things like the sex of the individual, the age, perhaps ethnic background, and so we can learn a lot from the bones, which is what the founder of the Body Farm, Dr. Bill Bass, really specialized in as a forensic anthropologist. And we'll talk a lot more about the Body Farm, but it's located in Knoxville, Tennessee, and is a very interesting research facility in which they actually use donated human bodies to study decomposition in certain environments. And then also forensic entomology involves the study of insects to be able to infer time since death or location of death, things like that. Trace evidence is a really big theme in forensic science, and it goes back to what we talked about in a former lecture called Locard's Principle of Exchange, the idea that when a person goes to a location, there's something from that person that ends up being deposited at that location, or even something from the location that becomes deposited on that person. It can also work person to person rather than just person to scene, and that person could be the perpetrator and or the victim. So Locard's Principle of Exchange is the basis behind the use of trace evidence. There are lots of different types, and the particular type of hair as trace evidence generally is a type of class evidence, which you remember means that we can narrow down the perpetrator or victim, whoever's hair that is, to someone with a certain type of medulla or a certain type of coloration in the cortex or something like that. If the follicle, the part where the hair attaches into the head, is still present, then perhaps there could be DNA that we could find there, which would be a type of individual evidence. Another type of trace evidence are fibers. These could be natural fibers, which would be types of like clothing or rope that come from organisms, or it could be synthetic or man-made fibers. Again, Locard's Principle of Exchange is at work here, and this can help us to find perhaps an origin of that evidence. Other types of trace evidence include soils, pollen, spores, which are kind of like the seeds of some plants. This could also be tire impressions, paint, anything where we can link suspect to crime scene, suspect to victim, victim to crime scene, then that can be a helpful thing. So even something like soil types or sand could be something that could provide that linkage. Another type of trace evidence would be impressions. This could involve tire track impressions, shoe impressions. This could involve the impressions from a bite mark. Odontology in general is the study of teeth as it relates to forensic investigation here, which, as I said, could include bite marks, or it could include identification, perhaps post-mortem, as the teeth, even through fire, tend to really stay intact and be able to give an individual type of evidence of identification. Another type is trace evidence. For example, if there's a broken piece of glass, we can use that to perhaps link a suspect. Let's say he's got a little piece of glass in the hem of his pants, and it can be found that that glass has the same refractive index or the same density as the glass at a crime scene where there was broken glass. Then that could be a type of circumstantial evidence. There could also be fingerprint or blood deposits on that glass. So serology is another form of evidence, which would include blood, semen, saliva, other bodily fluids. And specifically with blood typing, O positive, AB negative, etc., would be a type of class evidence, whereas DNA, which is found from the white blood cells in a blood sample, would provide individual evidence. The other part of blood would be the blood spatter, which is where physics really enters in. And we're going to be able to calculate the angle of impact and the trajectory of a blood spatter to be able to recreate more about the story of the scene. Fingerprints are a long-standing type of evidence, going back really historically to Sir Edward Henry in England. And so there is a long history, and despite some recent controversy, still a really seminal type of evidence that is used. IAFIS is a type of digital database that serves to be able to track different fingerprints that are uploaded. It stands for Integrated Automated Fingerprint Identification System. We're also going to look at drug identification and toxicology. And this is going to be something that we study different aspects of that, including the chemical tests for being able to detect traces of that. Explosives and accelerants would also be something that we'll look at, trying to again link people to that crime and establishing a point of origin for a potential start to especially a fire. We'll also look at question documents. These could be handwritten, they could be typed or printed. We're checking for authenticity, forgery, any of the above. And then firearms and ammunition. So looking at perhaps cartridges and the make and model, the type. Also looking at the individual characteristics based on rifling or the markings from the barrel of the firearm that it makes onto the bullet. Gunshot residue is another thing that can be used, although based on recent changes in what is readily accepted in the scientific community, we're moving away from gunshot residue as a viable type of evidence. Here you see the evidence of the rifling or the individual marks that are made on the bullet, and a comparison microscope where you can look at two at the same time, one that's been test fired and one that was recovered from the crime scene, could be really helpful for this. So I'm looking forward to the rest of our course. Thanks for tuning in for Types of Evidence.